Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. Today, I have the founder and president of Evelop, Stacey Schroeder.
Schroeder, you got it, Megan.
Awesome. So, welcome, Stacey. Thank you so much for joining us today on a Friday. I am in Minnesota right now visiting my sister, so I have a different background than normal. And the weather is really windy, but 46 degrees. So hopefully later on we can go outside and hang out at some point. But again, welcome so much. Thank you for coming here. I really want to kick off the conversation to get a little bit more information about yourself to help our audience know a little bit more about you too. So can you explain to us who you are, what Evelop is, and how you got involved with manufacturing?
Yeah, happy to, Megan. And thanks again for this opportunity. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I know that we've been in contact over the years in a number of different varieties about different opportunities. So I'm glad we finally are making this work.
Me too.
I am a total nerd at heart. I grew up helping my dad do things with, plumbing and electrical and working on the cars and home improvement and you name it. So, I grew up outside of Metro Detroit, so everybody has project cars, and I was certainly no exception. And when I got into high school, my parents wanted me to go to college. Neither of them had that opportunity. So they pushed me to do really well with school and try to get some scholarships. So thankfully, I was able to get a pretty good scholarship to Michigan State University. But then that next question was, well, what do you major in? Right. So my parents said, you're pretty good at math. How about you try this engineering thing out? So that is literally how I got started within the engineering space. So, I tried out mechanical, didn't seem like the best fit, took an intro class to material science and really just fell in love. It's that whole analysis of the foundation of engineering. So metals and ceramics and polymers and what to use for what applications, how they fail. Really sort of that investigative approach. So did that as my, undergrad degree, stuck around at Michigan State, did a 1-year master's in manufacturing management, and then was ready to enter the workforce. I had my resume with my good grades and all my part-time experience, and nobody wanted to hire me. So I applied at all kinds of manufacturing companies, and what I discovered was I had some barriers. I didn't have any co-ops or internships in the manufacturing space. I had things like working in retail, working in restaurants, working as a house painter. And I think there were some concerns that I wasn't ready to get my hands dirty. Being a young 21-year-old female, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, they didn't think I could handle it. So I had to get
It was more based off of not having the experience that they weren't looking at you. And sorry that I interrupted your answer, but when you were going through your educational journey at Michigan State, did they have opportunities within their curriculum for internships or apprenticeships? Did they have those that you could sign up for? Because I know some universities do that and some don't. Some throw you out to the wolves when you're done and just good luck to you, hope for the best kind of thing.
That's a really good question, Megan. And one of the things that I'd like to share is, what I learned after the fact, right? So my ignorance around the different styles of engineering. So mechanical engineers, they typically get a lot of great opportunities for internships. There's some for civil engineers, for electrical engineers. Material science seemed to be kind of off in its little own corner. So a lot of the experiences that were offered were more based in the lab. So I had plenty of experience, looking at cells in a microscope and dealing with, graduate students and helping write papers, but it wasn't really hands-on work experience. Yeah. So what I would say is, use those resources available. If there's student clubs in the particular area of engineering or manufacturing training that you pick, get involved, ask questions up front. The more you can build relevant experience from an early age, the better position you're going to be in.
Absolutely. So you are the founder and president of a company called Evelop. Can you explain what Evelop is and how it ties in with the manufacturing sector?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll fast forward through my career. So after I finished up my engineering degree, I did get a job with Owens Corning Fiberglass, and it was a great experience. Got to travel around to different locations, support different business units, learned a lot, met a lot of great people. And I learned that manufacturing is really where I'm most comfortable. It's fast paced, you're solving challenges, there's plenty of opportunity. If you raise your hand, somebody's going to give you something cool to work on. So I moved up the food chain into more leadership type positions, got into the workforce development space. And what I learned over time, having worked for public and private companies, big and small, and for a couple manufacturing associations, there's a lot of opportunity out there to help small and mainly mid-sized companies really get a handle on how do you best develop your people, right? It can be hard to get, a full-time staff person. It can be hard to do all of that research and development. So my sweet spot is to use that decade plus of experience around training and development for manufacturing and allow people to access part of my time. So I do work for women in manufacturing, I do work for other associations, and then I also do engagements with individual companies as well.
So in our previous conversations that we've had, you mentioned something about how one of your main goals is to help companies invest in their most important asset, which is their people. So when you're working with a company, can you explain that process and how to help them better understand the importance of good, skilled people working for their company? And, what are some of your suggestions that you provide them so that they're investing in their people in the right way?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right on, Meaghan. So the research shows that 9 out of 10 people are looking for their employers to provide more training. And 2 out of 3 people, if you ask why they left a job, it's because they didn't feel they were getting developed by their employer. So it is critical. One of the things I always say is people might be part of the problem, but they're always part of the solution, right? It's always people with people all day long. So what I like to share is sometimes learning and development can feel like an art, but it is a science. There is a process to it. And it always starts with analysis of performance. So what's your expectation and what's the reality, right? And then as an engineer, that's the kind of way that my brain works, right? It's looking at a situation, identifying current state, what's your targeted future state, and then digging into why. So the root cause can be things like we've got a motivation issue, we've got something going on outside of work with the individual. Maybe they got new software that they haven't been trained on properly. Maybe it's a lack of tools and resources, or maybe it really is a knowledge gap. So part of my role is to help companies dig into the why and then identify what the possible solutions are to fill that gap. So if I'm not the right expert to build or deliver the solution, I've got a big enough network where I can tap somebody that can help. So my ultimate goal is to connect people with the skills and opportunities they need for success. And sometimes that means with just me, and sometimes it means with my broader network. Either way, it's a win for the company and the individual.
And you mentioned too that you have done some work with Women in Manufacturing, which is a great national organization that supports women in manufacturing and helps them develop their skills further for their career pathway so that they can become leaders in manufacturing. What were some of the things that you've done for WIM, and how do you continue to work with that organization to help make sure that their mission is accomplished? And over the years, and I say we now because I've been a member since January, so now I feel like I can start using that pronoun we. How do you help them continue with them so that their mission continues to be successful?
That's another great question. Women in manufacturing is one of my favorite clients, and I don't care how many people hear it, it's 100% true. So Allison Graylis is the founder and president of WIM. I've known her for several years. When I was working for the National Tooling and Machining Association as their workforce development director, she tapped me to be on a panel for WIM at one of their annual summits, which was a huge honor and opportunity. And then when I moved over to the Precision Metal Forming Association, I had the chance to work for Allison directly, as she was doing a dual role at the time for PMA and for WIM. So I've gotten to know Allison. She is so competent, so smart, so articulate, so forward thinking. It's a great organization. It's been around a little over 10 years. I just got word that we hit over 6,300 individuals represented from over 1,000 companies, which is huge, right? The mission is so powerful. It's a great group. So some of the things that I do for them, I'm really an extension of WIM's team. So I'm basically their educational consultant. So I work with their team to design new programs. I bring in all the experts to deliver the programs. I handle all the logistics and moderation. So for example, we did their first ever virtual HR roundtable a couple weeks ago, and we had over 20 participants from both member and non-member companies. It was a 4-hour session. We brought in a couple thought leaders. I moderated some great breakout sessions. We had really great reviews from that, and we're looking forward to bringing another one in August. Another big initiative is their virtual learning series. So that's a once a month, 1-hour virtual session. So I have the absolute pleasure of working with the WIM members to pull in those competencies that they're looking to get skilled in, and then identifying thought leaders from my network to bring in. And I moderate each of those sessions once a month. And what I'm most proud of is our new Women in Production program. So that is a fully virtual cohort program that's going to be launching after Labor Day of this year. So I am in the thick of identifying thought leaders, negotiating with them, building the structure of the program. It's going to be amazing. And then we have 3 leadership programs as well. So there's the Management Development Program for newer leaders. We have the Leadership Institute, which is a partnership with Case Western Reserve University, and Leadership Consortium, which is a program for leaders of leaders, which I also help develop and design. So that is launching here in May. So WIM keeps me busy. I love working with them, and I think it's a great model that can be applied across other manufacturing associations and indeed within companies as well.
I think that's great, and I would love to have you back on with maybe some of the other women from WIM who have actually taken part in these programs and talk about the benefits and the key takeaways that each of them have taken away from the programs, and just dive more deep in more detail with those programs. I think that would be a fun episode to host. You did mention the Precision Metal Forming Association. Can you explain more what that is and how you were involved with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Cleveland, Ohio is actually a hotbed for manufacturing associations, which I didn't know until I moved here. So the Precision Metal Forming Association, or PMA, is actually used to be co-located with WIM. They celebrated, I think, their 75-year anniversary. They've been around a long time. So they have companies across the U.S. I think there's some into Mexico. And they deliver, all sorts of networking events. There's online training programming. There's, obviously live training programming. When I was there, I was part of the big implementation of their Metal Form EDU online training. So we migrated to a new platform for that. So I managed the rollout and the team for that, as well as helped with their different roundtables and their other training programs, including their live leadership training program. So another great association.
And one of the common denominators I find with all of these associations is their emphasis on education. And I've talked to several women within the sector, and we have the skills gap and we have the gender gap that's happening in the manufacturing sector. And a lot of manufacturers seem to focus on recruiting younger generations to the sector, starting either at the high school level or at the junior college level. And there seems to be this misconception for some that, in order to progress forward and move forward, you have to do, something at a 4-year college or university. And we're finding more and more that that's not the case at all. Like, you can really develop a thriving career starting at a community level college and, doing some sort of tech school with the trade skills. My brother just received his certification in welding, and he is so much happier. And he is one of those, who he went to college later in life. I think he started when he was 23, 24, went for music, couldn't find anything in that degree that he got with music. Great percussionist, by the way. And then got a job as like a liquor distributor, and then wasn't happy with that. So he found this welding certification course, fell in love with it, and now that's what he's doing, and he's so much more happier. And he's probably going to make more money doing that than what he did prior to that. So the question of recruitment seems to be at the top of conversations nowadays. And I wanted to see what you've heard through, the sector or from other conversations, or even your personal opinion. What do you think needs to change with how we're recruiting younger generations to manufacturing?
That's a really good question, and it's something that I put a lot of thought towards, and it's actually something that came up at WIM's recent virtual HR roundtable, as well as some of the volunteering that I do at more of a community level. So you're absolutely right. If you're first tapping people with information about manufacturing in high school or in trade school, it's probably too late. So starting in that elementary and middle school range is a really good idea. Some things that I always encourage companies to do is consider how you get information now. You're getting it online, right? So your website matters, representation matters. As you look to, start to engage within your community, identify those folks in your company that maybe are a little younger, a little newer. Get some of those folks with tattoos like me, get some folks with crazy hair, get some folks with, the fun cars. Make it so that they're relatable to the students, and then have your senior leaders talk to the parents. So it's okay to have different people from your company talk with different target audiences, because it will resonate more effectively. And think about how you can engage in the community. So maybe it's having your employees volunteer. So maybe it's a junior achievement. Maybe it's a mentoring program through, a local nonprofit or through a faith-based organization or another community group. Maybe it's getting involved with your Chamber of Commerce. Maybe it's putting up a table at the high school football games when we're allowed to have those in person again, where you've got some swag, you've got some information available, and again, you've got a diverse slate of employees and leaders from the company representing. And consider asking younger people to vet the information that they find about your company online, right? Is your website outdated? Do you have any videos of people that look like them? Do you have some statistics that are current? One of my favorite companies that I worked with at NTMA was Penn United Technologies in Western PA. They have a whole training center, and they engage with the local community to bring in high schoolers to do training, both online and in person. But some of the introductory material they share is around the statistics for college and college debt and what the outcomes are. So if you look 50, 60 years ago, the percent of people that went to a four-year university was smaller. Now it's much larger, but the percentage of jobs that require a four-year education has not increased at the same pace. So we have, in some ways, people that are overqualified by degree, but are underqualified when it comes to skills for those mid-range jobs that you can find in manufacturing. So for me, looking back, if I hadn't gotten those scholarships, I think the path for me as well would have been trade school, right? Try to work at a manufacturing company, gain those skills through an apprenticeship. And then what I found in manufacturing, if you are showing initiative and aptitude, they will invest in you. And then it becomes a partnership for the long run, where you can get some education, get some tuition reimbursement, and grow those skills, and you're benefiting yourself as well as the company.
I've worked at so many different manufacturing companies where they've had those set of employees that were there for 20 plus years, and they started in the shipping department and worked their way up. So it is, to some it might not be the most attractive career pathway, but it does teach people with hard work you can get good rewards, and just seeing them thriving in their positions now, it's really amazing to see. And it all started out, where they might have been 16 or 17 years old at the time, and it was their first job, and the culture in the company, kept them there for 20 plus 30 years, and they were able to develop their skills and grow that way and become a really good knowledge expert for the stuff that they make and produce. And it's really cool. I joined in on, we have a comment, 1 second. I joined in on a WIM community event recently. It was for the end of the month Women in History. And one of the things that we talked about was, okay, who's one of your mentors? And they wanted us to describe like maybe a situation where we felt like a mentor or a mentoree kind of thing. And one woman brought up a really good point. She asked a question about, what if you didn't want to be put in that position? And it kind of brought up the conversation about, we need to set up these mentor groups so that we can start, getting kids excited about manufacturing. But how do you set them up with the right mentor? Because sometimes two people just don't mix. They're like water and oil, and they won't get along. So I was curious to hear your thoughts on that, since you work so closely with manufacturers on how to invest in their people the right way. What sort of advice could you give manufacturers who are looking to set up those type of mentor programs? How can they set up the right student with the right mentor?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I'm reflecting on the mentors that I've had in my career. And they certainly don't all look like me, certainly haven't thought the same as all of them. And I think it's a very personal decision, right? So I think, the mentee has to be ready for it, and they have to understand what they're looking to get out of it. And it's best that it's not your direct boss, but it's somebody that knows kind of the area you work in. And it's somebody that you'd feel comfortable hearing both positive and constructive feedback from. So in my experience, it's best to find somebody that you've worked with maybe on a project, or, you're familiar with who they are for at least a couple months, and you feel comfortable with them. And then it's worth determining if a mentorship will make sense. And I think sometimes there's hesitation around it if it sounds almost too formal. I think that's true with any sort of like mentoring or coaching or, peer learning type of thing. So mentoring can be as simple as one conversation around one thing that you're struggling with to a years-long relationship. It's that old saying, sometimes people are in your life for a reason or it's for a season, and either is okay.
I always think about Star Wars when talking about mentorships for some reason with like the master and the sensei type of relationship. I don't know if that's the right way of like my true nerdism is coming out when I say that. Gwen Bradley commented and said, Stacey is spot on with everything she is saying. Love all those ideas. So true, especially in manufacturing. Thank you so much, Bradley, for tuning in. And again, so our audience that might be listening now, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section, and we can definitely ask those for Stacey during this episode. So we're getting close to our end time, and I wanted to ask you during this conversation, because this is a podcast focused on women in manufacturing, what are some of the things, that you believe women bring to the sector that men don't? Like, what are some of the things we do differently?
Yeah, I don't think my answers will surprise anyone necessarily. I think we're good at communicating. I think we're good at reading a room, right? And being comfortable accepting feedback, and also making it safe for people to share. So those are the skills that I certainly bring to the table. And it's helping with roundtables, it's helping with virtual events, it's helping in live training. And it's been proven that the more diverse perspectives you have, whether that's, race, gender, national origin, whatever criteria you want to use, the better results you're going to get. So I think what women bring to the table is right, wrong, or indifferent. We care more about getting to the best answer than we care about being personally right. So I think being able to push the ego down and push up the greater good is one of the skills that I've seen my fellow women bring to the table in manufacturing.
So, and since you're in a leadership position with all of these great organizations and you've had conversations, especially involving conversations about women being involved in the sector, what are some of the things that you've heard of why women just don't come into the sector? Why do some women go to other industries such as medical or healthcare or teaching? What are some of the things that you've heard from other conversations you've had?
Yeah, I think, so starting at a young age, it's a lack of awareness. And I think that's for women and men. So what does manufacturing look like outside of the I Love Lucy episode where she's frantically stuffing chocolates in her mouth, or the really scary videos about the Industrial Revolution that you see in school, right? It's much more than that. It's much cooler than that. It's much cleaner than that. So I think awareness is one. I think the other thing that can be hard for women is, depending on your life path, you might reach a point where you're making some tough decisions around scheduling. So sometimes to move up in manufacturing, you're going to be working a second or third shift. You're going to be pulling some overtime. You're going to be on a special assignment where you have to travel. So I think this is certainly not my own pearl of wisdom. It's something I've heard many times before. To succeed as a woman in manufacturing and to rise in leadership, you need a strong support network, whether that's a partner who is willing to give and take and have, the lead trade back and forth, whether it's an extended family or friend group. You need folks in your corner that understand that it's not always going to be steady state. And you need to be okay that it's not always going to be steady state either. And it's okay to advocate for yourself. So I remember an instance working at Swagelok, and I was in a corporate quality group, and we had a bunch of men, one other woman and myself, and the men all had stay-at-home wives. And the woman said one day in a meeting, I need to get me one of those. That just sounds so helpful to have somebody to take care of all that outside of work. And you could just see the shock on the men's faces, because these are sweet men. These are great human beings, but they had no idea, they hadn't thought it through, what some of the decisions that they were making would mean to somebody that lived alone and had children and had responsibilities. So if you don't tell people what you're up against in a respectful way and ask for what you need, you're not going to get it. One of the other things I always say is closed mouths don't get fed.
Right. That's a good point. It's so interesting, like the pathway that I chose, because my mom had 6 of us and she was a stay-at-home mom, and I didn't realize my dad was in manufacturing until much later. We just knew that he was always gone traveling, and we didn't understand why. And when I got involved as a writer for manufacturing, I started understanding, like, wow, there's a lot of moving parts here to make this sector work and operate smoothly. And it's not just dependent on what's going on here in the United States, but what the rest of the world is going on. The pandemic was a prime example of how things can quickly shut down and stop production, because if suppliers can't get their materials from somewhere, there's nothing to be made and everything was delayed. So many moving parts, and I know it was a huge headache for a lot of leaders at the time. And I give so much respect for those people that lose sleep over it, because you literally lose sleep, and especially if it's your passion and you don't want to let everybody else down. And then I think what's cool about today is there are a lot of single moms in the sector, and a conversation that I attended at an IMTS a couple years ago, it's probably like 6 years ago now. They talked about, what can we do to adjust so that we can make more flex time available for single moms. And one of the panelists, she was a CEO of a major company, and she's like, unfortunately, on the shop floor, there isn't much that we can do, because the shop floor requires 100% participation, and they have to be there. So it's really hard to kind of adjust those hours of production And she's like, it would have to change the whole dynamic of how we run our operations in order to provide that, which I thought was a really good point. So in some of those situations, you really can't change it, I guess. But if someone figures that out, that would be amazing to see how they figure it out so you can still make products, but still provide that flexibility for single parents everywhere. I think that'd be a $1 million idea right there.
Well, and I want to give just a teeny bit of pushback. So I've heard examples of small and mid-sized manufacturers where you can adjust some of those expectations, right? So I think what the pandemic has taught us all is we need to get real clear on what success looks like. What does good performance look like for every single role? Because it's not about button seat time. It's not about feet in front of a machine time. It's about what are those quantifiable metrics that mean you're being successful. So if it's a matter of creating some, job sharing or doing some cross training or creating flexible cells where you can interchange who's doing what when, there are opportunities. There are ways to do that. There are ways to get good process control. There are ways to reduce setup time so that you can get more flexible for your people, because they are your most important asset. And we've got good people. You want to keep them. And that means understanding where they're at in their life and doing what you can to help make it possible for them to continue contributing.
That's great, Stacey. Well, is there anything during this conversation that you feel like I didn't ask? Like what's something you can think of that I should have touched on but didn't?
Yeah, I think the only thing I wanted to bring up is we talked a lot around manufacturing, but we didn't talk as much about why it's important to focus on your leaders' skills as well, right? So if you think about it, you probably have a lot of supervisors and a lot of managers, and then you have fewer as you move up the food chain. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it seems like those high-level leaders are getting some access to cool training, you're building their skills, you're focusing on their development. And then those supervisors and managers that are impacting wide swaths of your company sometimes are left in that gray area where they're not taking a lot of continuing education. So that's just something to consider. I'm always happy to have a conversation about it. I do a lot of work for the Institute for Management Studies, and that's the space that we fit in, is working with those folks to build their core competencies and make it so that work works for everyone.
So if someone wanted to reach out to you, that's a lot of feedback. If someone wanted to reach out to you and find out more information about Evelop and how Evelop can help them with some of the things that you suggested, what's a good way to contact you or reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can check out my website. It's buildeveloplead.com. You can also reach me at Stacey@buildeveloplead.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can always send me a connection request. And I've got all of my contact info both on my website as well as on my LinkedIn profile.
Excellent. Well, Stacey, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate the conversation. I learned so much more about you and your company. And I look forward to continuing to collaborate and work with you, because now that I'm a part of WIM and I'm starting to dive more deeply into these other organizations, I definitely feel like I can reach out to you and, collaborate more and have more discussions about how to make manufacturing a better place to be, especially for women that might not know what their career pathway is. So thank you again. To all of our listeners as well, too, I wanted to thank you for personally coming on and joining the conversation. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. We're also available at Mavens of Manufacturing.com. Ooh, not enough coffee today. And we also have a LinkedIn and Facebook page. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great
weekend. Thank you so much. My pleasure, Megan. Take care.
You too. Bye. This has been another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. Subscribe for more and make sure to tune in next time.